Hey there, thanks for checking out this editable countdown motion graphics template. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of how to install it, how to use its basic features, and how to get the most out of it. We're going to be working in Premiere Pro, and the first thing you want to do is make sure your Essential Graphics panel is opened up. If it's not already open, just go over to Window, navigate down to Essential Graphics, click that, it should pop up, and then you can dock it wherever you want. Next, just click on the Browse tab, and then there's a few different ways you can get the motion graphics template into the Essential Graphics panel. The first is that if you loaded it into your local templates folder, you can just click on that and find it there. If you put it into one of your Creative Cloud libraries, you can find it by clicking on that, or you can load it directly into this panel by going down to this little Install Motion Graphics Template button, click on that, and then navigate to wherever you saved it on your computer, select that, and then hit Open. And now it should load it directly into that panel. Since Premiere Pro comes with a whole bunch of different motion graphics templates already built in, it might be a little difficult to see it or find it, and it can be kind of a pain to kind of scroll down to find it. So I found the easiest way is just to go up to the search bar here, type in countdown, hit enter, and then it should show up right there. Now you might try to just grab this and pull it into your timeline and nothing's going to happen, or you might try to drag it into your project panel and also nothing's going to happen. The reason for that is you have to have a sequence already opened to put a motion graphics template into it. So just go up to File, New, and then choose Sequence. It doesn't really matter what the settings are because we can change that here in a minute. I'm just going to call mine Countdown, hit OK. And now I should be able to drag this right into my sequence like so. It's going to ask me if I want to change my sequence to match this template. Usually you'll probably want to do that, but if you want to, you can just keep the existing settings. But in this case, I'm going to change the sequence settings. It might take a few seconds to load it into Premiere, and even after it technically loads it, once you click on it right here in the timeline, it might take a few more moments just to kind of load everything in. There's tons of things happening under the hood inside this template, so Premiere has to load all those things in. But once it does, you'll see this panel over here on the right change to the Edit panel. After it's fully loaded, you'll see this Edit panel with all these different options where you can customize it, so let's get into each of these individual options. The first is the timer, where you can change many different basic things, like the universal text color just refers to the overall text color, so I could change it to like this blue, and it's going to change every single character, and you can change it to whatever color you want. Unfortunately, if you click on the color wheel, you don't get a live preview of what the color is. However, if you do use the eyedropper, it for some reason will give you a live preview, so that's one way you can do that. The next is the main text position. This allows you to change up the text position both horizontally on the x-axis as well as vertically on the y-axis, and so it's pretty easy to do that. There's also the second text position. This refers to the two numbers after the 1 minute mark because that colon goes away and then these are separate characters, so you can change the second text position. This is linked to the main text position, so if you change that, it'll also change that, but then you can change this independently. So it lets you really just kind of dial in exactly where you want everything to go. Next is the text scale, which allows you to scale the text up or down. This is all vector unless you're using a font that's image-based, and so you should have nice crisp edges, no need to worry about pixelization. One thing to note about the scale is it's scaling from the center of this composition rather than the baseline of the text. It's not actually scaling up the characters themselves, but really just all the text as a whole, so just keep that in mind. There's also text spacing, which serves as a quick and dirty kerning or tracking, so you can increase the spacing between the characters or squish them together just depending on what you're going for. Okay, so that's mostly the timer panel. There's also the font, however, which is also pretty important. This allows you to change the font for each one of the characters. Unfortunately, there's not really a good way, I should say, to link all of these together to just change one font. In After Effects, it just creates a lot of processor-intensive expressions, and so the responsiveness of it just takes a huge performance hit, and I found it was much easier and faster actually to change the fonts individually. So you can basically change fonts like in any other application. Just click on this drop-down menu, select from any font on your system. You can also just type in something if you want, like I have one called Old Pines that I like. right there, and you can also change up any styles if any styles are available. Not every font will work with Premiere Pro, and that's a limitation on Premiere Pro's part, but most of the fonts that you have on your system you should be able to use with this template. There's also a faux bold and a faux italics that you can use. There's also the ability to add all caps or small caps. For most numbers that's not going to work, but if the ability is there within the font set for those, that will work. And so I'm just going to go through and change all the fonts for each of these, and you can see once I kind of pick the one that I want, it's really easy just to type the rest of these in. It doesn't take much time at all. And so the performance improvements that you get just doing it this way is I think worth the cost of having to enter these all in manually. So just like that, I have all my fonts changed, I can close it up, and I'm good to go. Alright, so next up is the individual position, and this allows you to modify the position of each individual character. For example, with this particular font, the colon is sitting a little far down for my taste, so I'm just going to nudge that up just a little bit, nudge it over to the left. And so the great thing about this is it allows you to really just dial in exactly how your countdown looks. You don't just have to live with whatever the template gives you. You can really make it your own and make it work with any font that you use. And so this gives you really fine-tuned control to really just create something that looks really great. Alright, so next up is the individual color, and as it suggests, this allows you to give each of these characters its own color. To activate this, just turn the master opacity up above 0. It can be anywhere between 0 and 100. At 100 it's full on and it'll override any other thing in this panel, but then you can kind of blend things in with opacities in between. So I can choose, let's say a pink for this, and maybe I'll do another like purplish color for that. And you can really just make these whatever color you want, which is really cool, and it gives you tons of flexibility. With this, you can of course use the eyedroppers if you want to save some time, or if you have some specific colors that you want to use. And so just like that, all my individual characters are changed in color, so it's really simple. You can also play around with the opacity to kind of blend it in with the universal text color. As you change this, of course, you're going to get some different blending options, which can almost function as a quick hue saturation adjustment. And so it really allows you to kind of audition different looks and different colors pretty quickly. If you put this on white, it'll wash it out a bit more. Or if you put this at 100%, of course, this is going to be full on color. As I briefly mentioned, this individual color will override any other universal text color or any of these image overlays that are available if you have it at 100%. But if you have it, anywhere in between, you're going to get some different blending, which can give you some interesting looks. Okay, so let's turn this back down to 0, close that up, and we'll go to the image overlays. So the first is the universal image overlay. We want to turn the opacity of this up, and we have our image right here. This is basically going to function as a matte for all of the text here, or actually the text is functioning as a matte for this. And so this image will only show up within the characters that you use no matter what font you use, and so it's really kind of cool. And so to change this image right here is actually pretty simple. All you have to do, there's a couple ways to do this. Just click on the hamburger menu over here and do Replace from Explorer or Replace from Finder if you're on a Mac. However, I think an easier way is just to load up any graphics or videos that you want to use into Premiere Pro, and then directly from your project panel, just grab, I'm going to grab a video clip here and just dump it right onto this image wall, and it should replace it just like that. And so when I come back here, you can see we got some movement going on there, which is pretty cool. With videos, one thing to keep in mind, so this video right here is about 30 seconds in length. That means that once it gets past 30 seconds, you can see it's not really moving anymore. So it's just going to hold on the final frame of that video, however long it is, until this countdown sequence ends. And so this video actually is set up to be a seamless loop. So let's say I wanted to have this loop for the entirety of this countdown. You can actually do that pretty easily. So what I would want to do is come over to this hamburger menu, click on it, and go to Open in Timeline. This is going to open up a nested sequence, and then I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, and what I need to do is get this to duplicate this enough times to get into this hashed area right here. So I'm going to do Command C or Control C on a PC and just come to the end of this, and then do Command V or Control V over and over and over until it overlaps into this hashed area. So this right here is the end of my sequence, and this is kind of just beyond. So now this should seamlessly loop through the duration of my countdown. At this point, I can go back to my countdown sequence, and since it's got to recalculate a whole bunch of things, it might take a little bit of time just to kind of, reset everything, get you back into your countdown sequence. And so if you get the spinning wheel of death or the spinning pinwheel of death, don't worry about it. It's just recalculating all these things and getting the template ready to be editable again. You'll know it's done with all those calculations once it opens up the edit panel again. So with this image, we have a bunch of things we can do. We can change the scaling of it, and you can see how it scales over here. So basically this conforms to whatever the size of your composition is. So you can see it's getting bigger and it's being reflected inside of those characters. If I put it down to like 22%, you can see it's getting cut off because of how small it is. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility with how you change the scale here. You can also change up where it's positioned on the X and the Y. You can also rotate it if you want to. So there's lots of different things you can do with this. One great thing about this is it doesn't have to be 100% opacity, so you could actually turn the opacity down. And right now it's blending into the universal text color. When you have this at 100% and at white, it should give you exactly what your image looks like. If you change this universal text color, you might see some changes, just because sometimes it's going to depend on the actual video itself, but it's just because of how the blending modes are working inside of After Effects. It's not something you need to know how it works, but you might just see some odd things happen. If you want it to look exactly like what you have here, just make sure it's set to white, and then you should get exactly what you have here. But if you want to play around with some things, you could put this down to like say 53%. Change your universal text color to something like that, and now you're going to get some different looks depending on what colors you use. And so you can create some really just interesting ideas really quickly, all of inside of Premiere without having to open up Photoshop or After Effects or anything like that. All right, so next up is the individual image overlay. This pretty much works in exactly the same way. We got to turn the opacity up, and of course it can be anything in between. So it works exactly the same way, and it'll even blend in with this as well. So you can create some interesting video or graphics overlays if you want to do that. The difference with this is these images are for each individual character. So this only goes with this character, the colon image only goes on the colon, etc., etc., etc. You can replace these and scale them, all that kind of stuff, use videos in exactly the same way, but it's just for each individual character. So I'm going to put this opacity down, and then we'll come to the final part, which is our animation section. So there's the animation in. Right around 2.5 seconds at the beginning of the countdown is where this animation starts. And you can see it's kind of coming from the bottom, animating up. It's just a nice simple animation. There's a few things we can change with this. The first is the amount. This is basically just how much the animation there is. If we put it all the way down to 0, it won't animate at all. If we put it anywhere in between, it's going to start from whatever that percentage is. You might not want it to start from right there, so I think it's usually best to either have it no animation at all or all the way from 100%, just so you can have a nice intro. There's also some other options. So we have the position, which is where it starts from. So I could have it start from up on top, and it'll animate in from the top and kind of land there in the center. I could have it start from maybe the side and do like a diagonal in, something like that. You can change up the skew. You can change up the skew axis if you want. You can also change up the rotation, the opacity. So the opacity, if you have it starting from 100%, it's not going to fade in at all. And if it comes from outside of the frame, that's probably okay. Let's say it didn't come from so far outside the frame, like we did something like that. It's going to look, start from that, which you might not want. So again, this is another one of those ones where I think it might be best to either have it at 100 or have it at 0. Usually I think it's going to work best if you start from 0, but your mileage may vary. Lastly is the ease high and the ease low. This just refers to the easing both from where it starts and to where it ends, and so this will determine the smoothness or lack thereof of your animation, so you have full control over those pieces of the animation. Next up is the animation out, and this is essentially exactly like the animation in, except for an outro animation. This occurs right around 5 minutes and 6 seconds, so the countdown itself is 5 minutes and 10 seconds. There's 5 seconds on the front end, 5 seconds on the back end, and so it gives you space for the animation. And so you can see it start to animate out just exactly like the in, except in reverse. You can use all the same properties in exactly the same way. All right, last up is the wiggle, and this allows you to add some randomized movement to each individual character. So the position frequency is how many times per second each character is going to move about. So it's going to change position. So I'm going to change this to 6, so that'll be changing position six times per second. Position amount is how much it's going to change in pixels, and so this would be plus or minus 10 pixels 6 times a second, from the starting point of where it is. Rotation frequency is how many times per second the rotation is going to wiggle, and then rotation amount is how much in degrees it's going to wiggle. So if I use those parameters, this is what it's going to look like if I play it back. And so you can see we get some nice wiggle rotation, some nice just random animation on our characters. We don't have to use any keyframes or anything like that, so it's really great. If I put the position frequency down to say like 1, put the position amount up quite a bit higher, let's put the rotation frequency down to 1 as well. This is going to give us more of a kind of slow swooping. Actually, I left that up at 6, didn't I? So now it's going to give us some more slow swooping movements, but we still, have some random, position and rotation going on. You can go into, I believe, into like, say 0.5 if you want to, and so you can just really dial this in exactly how you want. Make it really subtle, really frenetic. It's really up to you. Anyway, that's basically it for this editable countdown motion graphics template. I hope you find it really useful, and get out there and create some really cool countdowns, and I will talk to you later.